Okay, so good day everyone. This is our last session for statutory construction, and I'm sorry for the delay of creating this content. Okay. Anyway, we have two more topics left, and I believe that I can finish this in less than 30 minutes because of the length of the contents of this subject matters. Anyway, so tonight we will be discussing the intrinsic and extrinsic aids of statutory construction, and then we proceed to the very last topic, which is the construction and interpretation of specific laws. Okay, so there are some peculiar laws that needs to be, or some peculiar laws that need to be considered in terms of construing their provisions. So that is why um, we need to know each of these rules, so that when you are confronted with ambiguity, or when you are confronted with susceptibility of interpretations, at least you already know what to do. Okay, so we begin with the first one. This is about intrinsic and extrinsic aids in construction and interpretation. So remember that statutory construction can only be availed of once there is ambiguity. Okay, so you do not resort to other modes outside verbal lehis if the provision is clear. But once there is already ambiguity, then all of these rules that we have discussed since from the beginning up to this time, you may use them as your guide in terms of construction. All right? So, the topic for tonight refers to another way of construing the law. Okay? This is intrinsic construction or interpretation and extrinsic construction or interpretation. So when you say intrinsic, meaning to say nasa loob, napaloob mismo sa batas. Kaya nga tinatawag siyang intrinsic. On the other hand, when you say extrinsic, you go beyond what the law is saying. Okay? So you construe this time the provision not based on other provisions or other sections of that same law, but you have to go now outside because you cannot find any way. So when can we resort to intrinsic and when can we resort to extrinsic? Well, number one, you can resort to this mode whenever there is ambiguity. Yun nga. That's the basic rule in statutory construction. If hindi nakaya ng verbal lehis, then that is the time that you have to use this this um, you have to use this guidance. Okay? So intrinsic is when you construe the said provision, okay, by looking in the other provisions of the said law. Meaning to say, you take the aids of other provisions or other contents of the said law in order to help you in understanding the said provision. Kasi malay natin, yung yung meaning ng provision na yan ay konektado sa iba pang provisions. And that is why we need to look also to other provisions that will or that may help us understanding that particular provision. Kaya tinatawag siyang intrinsic aids because you just have to go within the law. Okay? It could be that the the better way of understanding the said provision is by looking other provisions in the said law, in the same law. However, once you cannot really um, get, or we cannot really have other sections or other articles, other provisions in the said law, we cannot get the true meaning or the real intent of that particular provision, then this time we can resort to extrinsic aids. Meaning to say, this is the time that you go outside the law. Okay? This is the time when you resort to um, the minutes, okay, the minutes of the statute, the history, the opinions and the rulings of officials of the government called upon to execute or implement the administrative laws. We can also resort to contemporaneous construction by executive officers charged with implementing and enforcing the provisions of the statutes unless such interpretation is clearly erroneous. You can also resort to actual proceedings of the legislative body. So that is why you may visit the Congress, you may look on the minutes, the journal, okay? Kasi ine-enter yan doon if you remember the minutes and the journal entry in your constituent. So nandun yung deliberations ng Congress. So you might see any points of the lawmakers that will help you or that will aid you in understanding that said provision. Okay? Could be also individual statements by the members of the Congress or the author of the law. Okay? The reports and the recommendations of legislative committees. Okay? Then you may also resort to judicial construction that the law construe or um, other mode of looking for a better way of understanding the said provision outside the law. That's what you call an extrinsic aid. Okay? Intrinsic aid is when you can only address, okay, you can only address a better understanding of that particular section when you look to other provisions of the said law. Pag wala talaga, then that is the time that you resort to extrinsic aids. That is the time that you resort to um, Congress journal, the minutes, go to the history, go to the discussions, okay, to better understand it. You can also go to jurisprudence, okay, that will help you aid in understanding the said provision. Okay? So it is said here that where a statute is ambiguous, the courts may examine both the printed pages, okay, of the published act as well as those extrinsic matters that may aid in construing the meaning of the statute, such as the history of its enactment, the reasons of the passage of the bill, and purposes to be accomplished by the measure. Have you ever encountered a case assigned to you by your professor that when you check on the full text, mahaba siya kasi may mga portions doon na sinali yung ponente, okay? Sinali doon yung discussion sa Congress. Okay? So, yan yung minsan ginagawa ng korte in order to better understand the said provision. Okay? So, meaning to say, the court already goes outside the 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 law in order to interpret the said section. Okay? If you remember, I mentioned you a while ago na pwede yung author ng Congress or pwede rin yung somebody in Congress. But remember that individual statements by members of the Congress do not necessarily reflect the legislative intent because remember that they are working as a body. Okay, so the better and the safest thing to do is to look on the journal. Okay, you look on the minutes. Okay, and yan. Although the author of the law has this kind of intent, but the intent of the author may be different from the intent of the Congress once it has undergone readings. First reading, second reading, third reading. It will change along the way. So that is why the most important here as a tool in extrinsic aid is really the journal. Okay, the journal entry of the Congress. Okay, so ganun lang. Yun lang yung ganun lang ka short yung topic with respect to this. Basta what you can remember here in this topic is this is another tool of construing the said provision. Intrinsic, meaning to say, you can only go around the law in order to understand that particular provision. Okay, meaning to say, you may resort only within the contents of the said law. Baka nandyan lang. Kapag wala talaga, then that is the time that you resort to extrinsic aid, okay, in construing or interpreting the said law. Okay? Do you have questions? If you have questions, please feel free to email me, okay, so that we can address the matter before you take your final exam. Now, let's go to the very last topic of the subject, and this is about construction and interpretation of specific laws. Okay. While we have the tools in construing doubts or in construing the laws whenever there are doubts or ambiguity, okay, you also have to consider ano yung particular na batas na hinahanapan natin ng interpretation. Anong nature ng batas na to? Well, in general, um, there are provisions na sinasabi ng korte na it must be strictly construed. Pero meron ding mga provisions na sinasabi ng korte na it must be liberally construed. When you say strictly construed, it must be by the letter. Okay? By the letter. But when you say liberal construction, this is a provision where the court somehow gives allowance to mistakes, allowance to lapses, and still, dahil liberally construed meaning to say, hindi siya rigid yung pag-interpret ng batas na yan. Okay? Ngayon, that's how the court usually do. Okay? Either pwedeng niyang strict, pwedeng niyang illiberal. Pero sa lahat ng pagkakataon dapat liberal ang korte or sa lahat ng pagkakataon dapat strict ang pag-construe ng korte sa isang naturang batas. Depende. Depende. May mga provisions na kailangan strict talaga, may mga provisions na the court in practice or in principle, the court gives liberal construction. Okay? So, just to take note that liberal interpretation or construction of the law or rules applies only in proper cases and under justifiable causes and circumstances. This gives you the idea na hindi pwedeng i-operate ang liberal construction under the whims and caprices of the court. Okay? There must be a guidance as to why the court gives justifiable or why the court gives liberal construction as to this kind of provision. Okay? So, the court, you have witnessed that, you have read that in different cases that you encountered so far. Okay? The court usually gives liberal construction whenever there is justifiable cause or justifiable circumstance. Okay? So, however, there are specific laws na talagang fix na ang treatment ng court dyan. Kasi by principle, ganun na talaga yung in-observe niya. Okay? So, for example, in political law, okay, you have naturalization laws. Okay? If you remember in your Consti 1, meron kayo dyang Article 4. Okay, naturalization laws. I think it's Article 4, Section 3 or Section 4 na when you naturalize, okay, yung mga naturalization laws ng bansa, how do we construe them? Are they construed strictly or liberally? Ang sabi ng principle, with respect to our naturalization laws in the Philippines, it should be rigidly enforced and strictly construed in favor of the government and against the applicant. So meaning to say, ikaw na magka-apply ng naturalization, um, it must be strictly construed against you. Meaning to say, kung ganun ang treatment ng court natin sa naturalization laws, ikaw yung may burden talaga. Okay? So when you apply for naturalization, you have to strictly comply with the laws. You have to strictly comply with the procedure therein. Kasi ang treatment ng korte dyan ay yung provisions ng naturalization must be strictly construed against the applicant. Okay? So ganun. How about election laws? Okay, with respect sa election laws naman, how does the court treat election laws? Our election laws, especially laws which provide for election contests, they are to be liberally construed to the end that the will of the people in the choice of public officer may not be defeated by mere technical objections. Okay? So meaning to say, when you resort to election laws, or if this law that is subject for construction is an election law, okay, the court is being guided by the principle that it must be liberally construed to the end that the will of the people in the choice of public officer may not be defeated by mere technical objections. So meaning to say, liberally construed. Ngayon, let's go to labor laws. Labor laws naman, whenever there are doubts, okay, and that provision is being a subject of construction, the doubts should be resolved in favor of the employees. Okay, and strictly construed against the employer. Okay, so yeah, even our SSS, okay, the it must whenever there are doubts in our social security laws, okay, the the construction, whenever there is a doubt in the interpretation, the construction is leaning towards the beneficiaries. Okay, it must be given liberal construction in favor of the beneficiaries. Okay. How about retirement laws in the Philippines? With respect to the retirement laws in the Philippines, still liberally construed in favor of the retiree. Because again, that's the retiree is an employee. Okay? And once he retires, he is no longer capable of earning, or the the earning capacity is now terminated. Okay, so meaning to say, how can he be able to sustain himself once he retires? So the court deals with our retirement laws liberally in terms of doubts. It must be liberally construed in favor of the retirees. Okay, so again I am reminding everyone that if klaro ang batas, there's no room for construction. Okay? But if there is doubt, okay, with all the construction tools that we learned in this journey, you also have to consider the nature of the law that is being subject of construction. Is this a political law? Is this a labor law? If it is a political law, what kind of political law are we referring to? Baka nandun sa specifications, baka naturalization law pala ito, or um, baka other na political branch. Okay? And with respect to labor law, is this labor code? Is this a retirement law or social legislation? Okay? But yeah, you have to know that because there are already established guidance. okay, or guidelines in terms of how do you construe or how does the court construe a specific law. Okay. How about criminal laws natin sa Pilipinas? How does the court construe criminal laws, especially if naging subject ito ng construction dahil merong doubt or merong ambiguity. The penal laws are to be construed strictly against the state and in favor of the accused. Please take note of that. Okay, commercial laws, like particularly insurance laws. Okay, contract of insurance. And then merong doubt as to the meaning or interpretation of the provision. How do we construe that? Okay, according to the established rule, it must be construed liberally in favor of the insured and strictly against the insurer. Okay, you will encounter this when you go to insurance law. Okay, how about tax? Tax laws. With respect to tax laws, it depends. Okay, okay, you have to qualify tax laws. Generally speaking, taxation, whenever there is doubt, the tax laws must be construed strictly against the government and liberally in favor of the taxpayer. Okay? For the taxes, taxes are burdens. Okay? And they must not be presumed beyond what the applicable statute expressly and clearly declares. So, in short, whenever there is a doubt as to the tax imposition, okay, it must be strictly construed against the state and liberally construed in favor of the taxpayer. But if that particular provision in the tax law refers to tax exemption, okay, with respect to tax exemption, okay, it must be strictly construed against the taxpayer and liberally construed in favor of the state. Tax imposition, it must be strictly construed against the state, liberally construed in favor of the taxpayer. Tax exemption, baliktad, strictly construed against the taxpayer and liberally construed in favor of the state. Now, let's go to the rules of court. Okay? Sa rules naman, like Crim Pro, Civ Pro, and all of your remedial laws, the rules of court shall be liberally construed in order to promote their objective of securing a just, speedy, and inexpensive disposition of every action and proceeding. So, it's not really strictly, it's not really liberally, but the 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 rules is leaning towards whatever is um, to promote the objective of securing a just, speedy, and inexpensive disposition of every action and proceeding. But there are parts in the remedial laws that the court treat them as strict construction. Okay, like for example, reglementary periods. Okay, periods usually are treated strictly. So you cannot just disregard that. You cannot just say that it must be liberally construed in favor of what is just, speedy, and inexpensive disposition. No, you cannot just invoke that because the courts usually treat the reglementary periods strict in terms of interpretation. Okay? So, yan. And that's the end of our subject. So, I told you it's very short. Again, you only apply STATCON, okay, whenever there are doubts, whenever there are ambiguities. Statutory construction is an art. It's an aid for you to understand a particular provision in law or the law as a whole. Okay? But if the law is clear, okay, then there's no point for you to resort to this subject. You apply verbal legis. Okay? What is there is what really is intended by the lawmakers. But when that provision is susceptible to other interpretations, then this subject might come in. Okay? So that's it. I hope you have learned something for the entire semester. I am planning to give you only one more written exam, okay? And that will be your midterm. The midterm coverage will be from the time where we ended the coverage in the first exam up to this portion. Okay? That will be the coverage kasi sobrang short lang talaga yung coverage. So, yan yung coverage ng midterm exam ninyo. And then we will have a practical exam for the final grading. Okay? I will give you the instruction to your BDEL and I will let the class discuss it. I will let the class decide also when you want to take your exam. Basta before deadline of submission, I need to submit grades rin. Okay? So if you have questions, please feel free to um, email me in the school email, or you can just drop your questions in the comment box of this video lecture. God bless everyone, and I'll see you in the other law subjects. I hope that you are enjoying the journey in law school. God bless and have a good day.